Good morning. Jean-Michel, please, I will ask you to speak first.
Yes, thank you, Will. Good morning, everybody. Just a few words from me to wish that this seminar organized with our British colleagues will provide you the answers you can still expect. Since the beginning of the year, a large number of questions have been raised and resolved by France and UK. We all know that there are many more to deal with. I hope that this seminar prepared with our British colleagues and that we want it together to be very practical and concrete will provide you with the additional information you expect. Have a good seminar. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean-Michel. And also for a few words from me before we start the sessions. And thank you to Jean-Michel and his team for the excellent cooperation at the technical level that we've shared over the past few months and all of our meetings, including for today. And today is about sharing issues and the challenges that you have all faced since the 1st of January with the movement of goods between Great Britain and France, particularly across the short straits. We have experts from both sides of the channel today representing customs and SPS administrations, and of course yourselves from industry who will also participate in the sessions. We do have an agenda which is split into three main parts. The first part is on logistics and customs. We have an opening session with two customs agents, one French and one UK. We will have a state of play session from the Douane and then also from Border Force about the inland border facilities with an update from HMRC. And as Margaret has explained, there will be an opportunity to put questions and answers either in the chat field or to raise your hand if you wish to interact directly with one of the speakers. The second session is in the same format, an exchange of views on SPS, where we will have a colleague from DEFRA and from DGAL, and we'll also have some representatives from both the Food Drink Federation and from Logistics UK with a question and answer session. And then the third final wrap-up session is about an open exchange of views from you to us, to the French and the UK officials, about planning for 1st of April and for 1st of July, so that we can best understand the views from economic operators and what's most urgent to cover in our future engagement. And then Jean-Michel and I will close the event. So welcome to the webinar. I hope it's useful and positive for all. And I would like to move to the next slide and give the floor to Caroline de Saussure, who will present and host the session on customs. Caroline, are you there, please?
Yes. Good morning, either. Good morning, everybody. Yes. For this session, I first of all thank Olivier and Richard, who kindly answer yes to present their feedback on the first weeks of the re-establishment of the customs formalities between the UK and the EU. And I think it's good things to begin with that feedback, and then we'll be able with Dave Smith, who is the director for Border Force Southeast, to expose the analysis we can make about the situation, and above all, the recommendations and advices maybe we can bring to everybody. I think that's all for the moment. So if Richard and Olivier want to present the feedback they have from both sides of the channel, it would be great. Thanks to everybody.
Thank you, Caroline. Richard?
Olivier and Richard, are you both there, please?
Yeah, I am. Can you hear me? Olivier speaking.
Yes, I can. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Lisa. Richard, we're supposed to start. Richard?
I'm here.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Perfect.
perfectly. Thank
Excellent,
you.
excellent. Yeah. Thankfully, thanks to Olivia, we had a good conversation, and we decided to do topics from both sides. So the important issue we still feel is transit and guarantee levels, because we knew that the guarantee would be the requirement once we ended transition, and this hasn't disappointed. We have currently seen in July an increase of 150% in the number of T-forms or TADs that we have had to raise, and this brings with it the huge liability. There are initial LRN activations have been a bit of a problem in a reasonably thought out system of trying to keep activations away from the port, but it's great credit to Border Force, who have been receptive and proactive in improving this, and that continues to improve. The weak links that we are seeing and the concerns that are prompted is in discharges of the guarantees elsewhere in Europe, which in some areas are going well beyond the 8 days allotted. The insufficient number of traders and forwarders with sufficient guarantees, or that they are prepared to utilise, is a huge issue. So the customs broker is actually late or no discharge. The work liability on some routes will force providers to cease on those routes, and clients, if that doesn't seem. We are often quoted CTC rules as agents, but many offices of destination are not prepared to use them to facilitate discharge and put on record a question. We're well aware that everyone can make mistakes, but mostly when provided with incorrect information. So I think going forward, there needs to be some greater flexibility to cancel or amend, or even replace when under customs control at dispatch or destination. I think everyone's keen for it all to work, but it's not a good motivation for all to do this if they get the increased volumes and have increased liability issues. There is some notifications that we would like to bring up on behalf of several of the agents who hold AEO accreditation, who are committed to fulfilling the function of doing the T-forms, but are seeking the rules, under the rules that some of the that we had addresses at the time, because everything is sensitive, and perhaps be able to bring down the need for clogging up some of the other internet sites, if we can actually do that and add the address officially later. And on that point, it would be aligning with other EU member states. And I think, so from the UK side, huge pressure, not enough people putting up guarantees or have insufficient levels, although I think they're obviously trying to remedy it. But there is a great caution on the ability to get these liabilities discharged. So, Olivia, I don't know if you want to add from your side.
Yes, thank you, Richard. So sorry, I had to switch off the video because it was difficult to hear you. We had a few words about transit. So on the EU side, we are also facing a few issues linked to transit. The first one is to discharge EU transit on UK side. We had a lot of transit not discharged for many reasons, including the fact that the drivers did not know how to do that, did not know where to stop, but not only. And we also had some issues with the transit coming from third countries, speaking about Switzerland, Turkey, countries like that, because even if it was working before, probably we think that, as it was a little, I would say, difficult in Dover facility or so in this area. So everything was different for the drivers. So anyway, it changed, and we had a lot of transit with difficulties to discharge. On the other side, we also had a lot of issues for transit coming from the UK. First, as Richard said, we had a few issues with the Elon facilities for the activation, for sure, when it was British Transit. And then we had so many mistakes. I mean, this is probably linked to the shortage, capacity shortage on UK side, but so many mistakes, I mean, weight, packagings in the transit, that we had a lot of issues at destination to negotiate with customs authorities to discharge the transit because they were wrong transit. Yeah, a lot of issues, and also the activation during the crossing was a big issue because a lot of transit at the beginning, now it's getting better. A lot of transit at the beginning were not activated during the crossing, linked again to a lot of different issues, I guess, at the border. Yeah, and we had, to be honest, in France, it was not so difficult because the border is in France. But when the transit were going up to Germany, Spain, or other countries, it was more and more difficult for them to understand why the transit was not activated at the border. I can understand that, but so for transit, I think that's it. Richard, if you want to speak about the agents.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Olivier. Yeah, the capacity always a concern about how many customs brokers there would be to perform customs documentation, and this has been shown a well-founded concern around the EU, especially. Around the EU, but especially the UK. For instance, daily we're contacted by the ill-prepared and those who had thought they had arrangements with an agent only to be turned away. We find the capacity issues with brokers all around Europe and the UK. The stress is immense, and despite agents employing more to train, COVID-19 hampers the training, coupled with those experienced being either enticed away or just walking away from the business. We are coping and continue to scale up under difficult conditions. But despite the time from 2016 to where we are now, the deadlines passed have desensitized a lot of people and has exacerbated this situation in the UK and in Europe, I believe. Many around the UK and Europe believed that there would be an implementation period once the deal was struck, and many also assumed that the deal would mean nothing changes, and I think now reality has dawned on them and there is a mass scramble. We are certainly getting calls daily on what they need to do. Could we do their work? And some of these companies have huge volumes that we just can't cope with. And I know that this is shared by many of the customs agents who are actually turning off or turning away work that hadn't been previously factored into anything we had from them in the past. So I can see that will improve as we're scaling up to it, but that's going to take a great deal of time, especially when we're trying to train a resource that isn't actually readily available. Olivier, you probably have a comment on that.
Yeah, thank you, Richard. So yes, on French side, I think situation is a little better, not perfect for sure. I mean, we worked before to hire new people, to train new customs clerk. The fact is, I think we were starting with more clerks than the UK side, and the need was a little less for sure. But so it was very hard beginning of January, to be honest. At the end, we did it on French side. But I think it could have been better if we have no mistakes. I spoke about the mistakes on the document at the beginning. Really, the teams were really working on solving issues, mistakes, and as the border, a lot of trucks were crossing without activating documents or sometimes without documents. the teams were really looking after these issues. So now it's better because the crossing is now, I would say, nearly normal. So it's linked to capacity. I think we are going now to normal way, except for SPS check. SPS check has been a big issue at the beginning. It is still something we have to focus on because it is specific. Working for SPS goods is really specific. We are not all working for SPS goods. And also we need a 24/7 capacity, which has been raised very quickly at the beginning, that we had an issue there. We also need some pre-launch declaration in TRAS and the TRAS system. A lot of trucks were crossing in January without any pre-launch declaration for SPS goods, which is not good at all. So we had to to find companies to do that, to find agents, and also because we were not aware about all these companies looking for new agents in January, we had a lot of issues, for sure. Because first we started to work with our customers, and then we started to support those we just discovered that they had something to do. So this is the next point. And after, of course, a subject, we discussed a lot about this, but commis. When you cross the French border, you need someone to act on behalf of the importer. And when you speak about SPS goods, you will have, you may have control, physical control, not always, but you could have physical controls, and anyway, a document check. And in this case, you will need someone at the border to support the driver. And this is a very important thing. And some companies are ready to support for that. Specific companies working as commis. So a very important point about the commis. I know it's not a new thing, but it has been difficult also. A big point, a big subject on the French side today, it's specific on French side, it's about exit confirmation for export declarations. So we are facing a lot of issues there, with a lot of exports that are not discharged at the border, not closed. So we are working on it today. We started to discuss yesterday, to be honest, with Eurotunnel. We are starting to do some tests and to try to identify as agents if we can see if there is something common with the issues we have. So we are checking the logistic envelopes, everything. If it's group age, if it's not group age. And so, the idea is really to solve this issue very quickly, because for sure, for our customers, it will be a big risk, fiscal risk, very quickly. So we need to solve this one. We don't know today why it doesn't work, but we are looking for it. So Richard, if you want to speak about Incoterms.
Incoterms, yes. Thank you, Olivier. Incoterms have obviously been seen by certain trades as a way out of taking responsibility for their movements. But many brokers are resisting taking on work where they're expected to make declarations or put up guarantees under DDP or ex-works movements. We continue to advocate terms of DAP or FCA as a minimum, as it should be the responsibility of the seller and the buyer for their export or import controls. Brokers are working with the information supplied by the buyer and seller, and as such, only seek to work as direct representatives because they are actually putting themselves in line for the information they're being supplied. And I take on board what Olivia said earlier about the mistakes being made. Yes, I'm sure there have been quite a lot in the increase in volumes and things, but a lot of that will be due to the quality of information we're also receiving and expected to act on. So As far as the direct representation is concerned, everyone is in the brokerage industry, of course, is very keen to make sure that we are direct representatives. And unfortunately, I think this is you're going to see more of it. People will be turning away DDP work due to the liabilities. But hopefully that will also bring on the responsibilities of the trade to actually take responsibility for their selling and buying. So, but as far as that's concerned, DDP and Ex Works in general, most brokers are avoiding it. I think that's
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Richard. So just to add one comment on that, it's the same for French agents, for sure. We are still having a lot of customers not understanding what it means about DDP or Ex Works. They were using them for many years, for sure. And we are today, for your information, we are still receiving on the French side some DDP shipments that are pushed by UK, British companies, and still with no solution. I mean, we are storing on French side in our facilities some goods that cannot be imported because the British still don't know how they will solve their DDP things. Huh? So, I mean, it's the subject is not solved yet. So we are trying to support, to explain how DDP should be changed, who could be the importer. And each time we go very quickly to who's going to pay the VAT. It's always. And it's not only about e-commerce, because e-commerce is for sure impacted a lot on that, but not only e-commerce. So DDP shipment, we are still focusing on that. We are still having issues. And so it's not linked to agents, it's linked to the way traders understand what the Incoterm is. It was just to add a word as a conclusion, saying that we are all working on both sides to solve the issues on agent capacity on UK side. As I said, it's nearly solved on the French side, except for we still have to focus on SPS for sure, for SPS goods, even if it's getting better. And as we also spoke about a few actions, we are trying to work on different actions, like for exit notification on the French side. And we are also working really together with also our French authorities on our side, and British authorities also. And so it's important still to work together for future. And the future for us is April and July. We don't forget these dates because we know it is the big next steps we have in front of us. And so we did the first one, I would say, and we are really now, we need to focus on the next two steps, which are two British steps, but very, very important for us to make sure we will cross the border smoothly in the next months. Thank you.
Okay, I think Olivier, have you finished? Is this the presentation of both you and Richard complete? Oh, thank you.
Yes.
We've got quite a few questions in the chat, but I want to hand back to Caroline because I think Caroline would like to make the presentation for the Douane, and then for David to talk about the inland border facilities, and then we'll pick the questions up at the end, if that's okay. Caroline?
Yeah, thank you, Heather. It's okay for me. Thanks, Olivier and Richard, for all those points and feedbacks. I will try to answer those which concern me, my part, the French customs. So I wanted to start with a very brief reminder of the main principles of the smart border, which is, the new system implemented by the French customs to cross the border. So I won't re-explain all the steps. I wanted to underline and to remind to everybody that the smart border is based on the anticipation of the customs formalities. So it's very important that the driver arrives at the border with all the documents needed for the customs formalities. But we'll see after that it's also important not to give him too many documents, because sometimes it's worth to give too much. And another point which is important is that the system, the SC Brexit, which is the IT application on which is based the smart border, is used only to connect the ferry companies and the tunnel systems to our existent IT tools. And so there is no need for the operators to connect directly to SC Brexit. The customs formalities must be done as for any exchange with a third country in the existing IT systems to declare product goods for free circulation, or to place goods under a transit procedure. It's a very important point, because we still have some question about that. How do I connect to SC Brexit? Actually, you don't have to. It's only system for us and the company. And the last point is, I think it's also important to remind that the pairing before the crossing, the moment when the driver has to present the barcode or the MRN of his document, this association between these documents and the immatriculation plates of the trucks is made by the ferry agent or the tunnel agent. And so that means the driver won't see first the customs services. And it's also an important point, especially for the exit from France, because we are sometimes asked that the driver is looking for the customs services, but actually he has to go through the pairing first. So that was the point I wanted to remind to everybody there, because it's important for the what I will explain next. So if we can go to the next slide, please. Okay, thank you. Actually, since the 1st of January, the smart border is implemented, and I think it's important to say that it works. The SC Brexit system works correctly as intended, and there is no IT problem with the system. And every time we have some troubles or issues, as Olivier mentioned, when a declaration is not validated during the crossing, not automatically validated during the crossing, or if there is some orientation on the orange line, although everything was done correctly. Actually, we, of course, analyze of those cases, and there is never actually IT troubles. So we were able to identify a lot of situations which can make the truck stop at the border, although it should haven't, or situation where the customs formalities are not discharged at the arrival, and we that's what I want to expose here. The fact is, it's very important to respect all the steps and all the process in a way this is the counterpart of an automatic system. Actually, the smart border is smart, but it's smart, which was we decided to learn to it in a way, if you see what I mean. And an IT system applies what it was told to apply. So each time there is a difference with which is expected. Of course, the flow is not totally correct. So the first point, which is very important, but I think we communicated a lot on that, but it's important to remind it and to say it again, is that at the pairing before the crossing, it's very important to present the right document to scan. And we had a lot of issues because the driver arrived with a lot of documents, and they didn't present the right one to the agent of the ferry or of the tunnel. And so the fact is to cross it's possible to have a TAD, a TAD, transit accompanying document, lodged in the British NCTS or pre-lodged in the French NCTS. It is possible to have a pre-lodged import declaration pre-lodged in the French Customs Delta G to declare the goods for free circulation, or it's possible to have a logistic envelope, which is the functionality proposed in the smart border to group that kind of document, the three I mentioned before. And that's all actually to at the import to cross. You can only have that document, and actually at the export, this is the same, but not EUD. The point is what we see, what kind of document mustn't be presented. Most of the time, the wrong document which are presented can be UK EAD, which is the document produced after the export declaration has been lodged in the UK system. So this is a formality for export from the UK, and it's not necessary to present it at the pairing. And the fact is that document, and especially the MRN, which is the number on it, is very close to the MRN on the TAD. So we had a lot of mistakes on that. But I think we now the agent of the tunnel and of the ferry are quite aware of which document they don't they shouldn't accept. So we have less and less cases on that type, but it still happens. So it's very important. I think it's not necessary to give the driver the UK EAD, but I think HMRC could say that better than me. The other point is sometimes we have an ENS, an entry summary declaration, which is presented also. And again, it's not a document the driver has to present, because the link between the ENS and the immatriculation plate is already done before the truck arrives at the border. So we find the ENS automatically in ICS, and there is no need of pairing. So it's a very important point to present the right document at the pairing. Because if it's not the case, of course, the risk is to have the truck to go to the orange line and to wait at the arrival on the port or on the tunnel site. The second point, which is, I think, probably the most important there, and Olivier and Richard, you spoke about the problem of the discharge of the transit, and of course, consequently, the discharge of the guarantee linked to the transit. And the fact is, it's very important to fulfill correctly the transit declaration. And what we see is we had a lot of transit declaration which can't be discharged correctly, or because there are some mistakes at the beginning. So I put only 2 examples on the slide, but because it wasn't possible to put everything, but we'll make a communication with all the advices and all the mistakes we found to insist on what points you have to be very careful. So just there to remind maybe that for the common transit, which means when the transit declaration is lodged in the UK, in the British NCTS, it is mandatory to mention a transit office, and which is the first customs office in the new territory where the truck enters. And so for the flow starting in the UK to go somewhere in the EU, the transit customs office must be located in France and not in GB, not in the UK, but the IT code is GB. And that means this is the same on the other flow. If a transit declaration is lodged somewhere in the EU to go to the UK, the transit office is in the UK and not in France. Another example, it's possible to lodge a union transit declaration in the French NCTS, which is called Delta T. And that means the transit starts only in France. But the fact is we developed a system where you can pre-lodge your union transit declaration. But the fact is, in that case, even if the legal procedure starts in France, the country of shipment stay the UK. So the code to use is GB. So you see, there are a lot of small mistakes like that. We saw also mistakes on the identification of the final consignee. Sometimes we see that the number used to identify him on the transit declaration is the VAT number, which is not relevant, and we need the ERE number. So again, we'll publish some recommendation, but the fact is, I wanted to insist on that. It's very important to pay attention on the quality of the data put into the transit declaration. And then I will go more quickly on that point. If you use a pre-lodge import declaration in the French system, Delta G, the fact it's a pre-lodge import declaration. So the declarant don't have to validate the declaration before the crossing. It's necessary to wait to receive the boarding notification, which will be sent by Delta G before the validation. It's a very important point because the declaration is pre-large and it can be definitive only during the crossing. So that's all for that part, but there are some example here, but the point is to keep in mind that actually the customs formalities must be done in the correct way for the system to works correctly. So, and this is the transition with the next slide, please, if we can go on. Yes, step by step. Actually, it's not possible for us to tell to the operators who has to do what, because Olivier and Richard spoke about the Incoterms, and of course, according to the commercial agreements you have, sometimes the responsibility is for one or for another actor of the commercial of the logistic chain. But what we can remind to everybody is that there are some steps which must be followed. And it's very important that in that chain, every actor do his part, and that the information are shared. Sorry, I won't go into all the details, but it's important that the operator, the importer, the exporter, the buyer, the seller, that they prepare in the better way all the information, all the data the declarant will need. Olivier and Richard said that it's not, it has not always been easy for the customs broker, the customs agent, especially in the first weeks, but of course, for them, the work is easier and go faster if they have all the right information to lodge the declaration with the correct data and data of quality, as I just said before. Maybe a point on which it is, I think, important to insist is the logistics envelope. It's not mandatory to use the logistic envelope, but I think it's a very a good tool because it's quite simple to use, and it offers the guarantee that the declarant, the one who lodged the customs declaration or the transit declaration, will put only the right document, the right barcode or MRN in the logistic envelope. And if you use the logistics envelope, you just have to give it to the driver, and so you have less risk to for him to present a wrong document. Another point which is also very important is to keep in mind that there is an entry summary declaration to lodge, and this is the responsibility of the haulier. It's again, this this declaration has not to be presented by the driver, but it has to be done. It's for safety and security reasons, so it's very important for us. And we insist on that. And of course, there are some penalties which can be given if it's not respected. And then I think I said what I wanted to say. Actually, I spoke already a lot. Yes, maybe just a last word, because Olivier, you mentioned the issue with the exit, the clearance of the exit in for the flow coming from the EU to the UK. And so that the fact is, for the exit, there are several possibilities, and it's not in that way, for that way, it's really important that the driver present the right document, not especially for the crossing, because in general we won't stop him, because it's possible, for example, to present a TAD to cross, and so we can't ask for him to present the EAD, because sometimes he doesn't have to do it. But we can't know at that moment which procedure has been chosen. And for example, if it has been decided to use the procedure which is called, I think in English, T1 plus AX, I think it's that. When the transit and the export formality are linked, normally it's not necessary to present the EAD at the exit. So what I want to say is that if the driver doesn't present the EAD, we can't guess. Actually, he should have done it, because sometimes it's not mandatory. So, and it will pass. So in that situation, the risk is the only way to prove the exit will be to use the alternative proof for the exit. So it's very important for the exit that the driver present the EAD if he has one to present. I think that's all. I think I've been, oh yes, just the document, but I won't take, I won't develop that. I think I spoke about the document, and it's only the reminder of the flyer the leaflet we prepared to show what to scan or what not to scan to enter France. So either, I'm sorry, I was too long. So I let the floor to Dave.
Thank you, Caroline. Excellent presentation and lots of questions, but let's move on to Dave with speed, so that there's a lot of important information that he would like to share from Border Force. Please, Dave.
Thank you, Heather, and thank you, Caroline. If I can just do a very quick sound check. Heather, can you hear me okay?
Perfect.
Lovely. Okay, so good morning, everybody. My name's David Smith, or Dave. I'm the Director for Border Force South East, and my responsibility includes the management of the Border Force functions at the Inland Border Facilities, IBFs. I'll talk reasonably slowly because I am aware that there are some colleagues that are struggling to hear in the chat bar, so my slowness will be deliberate. So firstly, just an overview. You will be aware that the IBFs were introduced for a variety of objectives, but one of the key ones was to ensure that we didn't have significant freight fluidity problems at the ports, particularly on the short straits routes. So that's been successful broadly in that we haven't had the kinds of queues at outbound or inbound controls that we were hoping to avoid. Notwithstanding that, there are some ongoing issues in the system end to end that we need to address together. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. It will be fairly basic stuff about the functioning of the IBFs, but really important because it is that the basic functions that are not being completed properly and causing the errors that we're seeing in the end-to-end process. So firstly, the IBFs are cross-government. They're not run entirely by Border Force. They're run by colleagues in DFT, HMRC and Border Force. So they're multi-government agency facilities. And they're also multifunctional. So functions include some COVID testing, although we don't want that to carry on as far as possible in the southeast corner, because that should be done as far as possible out of Kent. But there are also checks on Kent access permits. And then there's the functionality we're talking about this morning, which will be the formalities for crossing the border. Just to reiterate the point that Caroline has made, in that we need to view this as an end-to-end process. So this isn't just about getting your goods out of the UK, it's about getting your goods out of the UK and into France in a way that allows them to flow end-to-end and vice versa. And we've worked really very closely with our French colleagues to make sure our processes align. So getting the process right means your goods will go from A to B far more efficiently. So let's talk about some of the issues that we're finding at the IBFs. Next slide, please. So just again, basics, but really important. So what are the IBFs for? They are offices of departure and destination for CTC, so that's transit movements. They are processing centres for carnets, ATA and TIR. We can endorse CITES licences, but they are time-limited processes. You can only remain on the IBFs for 2 hours. So it's important that you arrive or your representatives arrive knowing what they're there for, what paperwork they have, what their functions are. What they are not, excuse me one second, what they are not truck stops or rest points for drivers. These are some of the issues that are impeding the efficiency of the inland border facilities. So they are not truck stops for drivers. They are not places to stop and then arrange your customs formalities. You should only arrive at an IBF if your formalities are already in place. There are no customs agents at the IBFs who can help you to provide the documentation. You should have it to hand before you arrive at an IBF. And they are not mandatory for every customs formality. So we see a large number of drivers arriving at the IBFs who actually do not need to be there, and they spend a lot of time waiting in the queue only to be told at the end that they should not have attended in the first place. And I'll cover some of that in a second. At the moment, the IBFs are mainly dealing with outbound goods, and that's obvious because of the UK's approach to the phased implementation process. So mainly at the moment it's outbound goods, but obviously over the next 6 months that will change to be a balance of inbound and outbound goods. However, there are some inbound functions which I'll cover on the next slide. Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, for those of you instructing haulage companies or drivers, this is a really important slide. So the loader, exporter or agent must make sure the driver has the following things. So they must know what documents they are going to present at the IBF, and they know what documents they are going to get back. One of our is fundamental, but it's a major problem at the moment, is drivers are turning up at the IBFs and they have absolutely no idea why they are there because they haven't been instructed properly. Some don't need to be there at all. Some are there for access permit checks. Some are there to have formalities checked. But we need to be much clearer with drivers why, if and why they attend an IBF. We also need to we need to make sure they have the correct documents and that the documents are accurate. So this goes back to Caroline's point about the accuracy of particularly transit. The transit formalities need to be completed properly, but they also need to have accurate information. So the first thing, so the LRN is the local reference number, and we use the LRN to generate an MRN and a TAD, so a transit administrative document. If the driver has an incorrectly recorded LRN, so a digit is wrong or any kind of incorrect number, it's very, very difficult to then find the correct MRN on the transit system and to print the transit administrative document for the driver to take with him. So the document has to be, or the reference number has to be precise and exact for the driver to process through the IBF properly. In addition to that, we see a lot of presentations where the driver doesn't have the full list of LRNs. So if the driver is carrying or expecting to have more than one TAD, more than one LRN needs to be presented, and they need to present all of them. Otherwise, there are consequences which I'll cover on the next slide. So anyone coming into the country will already have, so this is inbound to the UK, should already be on a transit administrative document. And that's the document they should present if asked to go to an IBF for inbound transit. If your driver already has a transit administrative document, so they may have been to another inland border facility in another part of the country, or they might be coming from an authorised consignor premises, and they have a TAD already, they do not need to go to an IBF. They are ready to go to the border, unless they are otherwise asked to attend because of an examination requirement through the HMRC app. So they should, if they are processing under a TIR or ATA carnet, they should of course carry the document with them. And they should also carry, if necessary and if appropriate, customs import references from Chief or CDS. And then alongside all of that, if there are applicable licenses, i.e. For example, CITES, they need to carry the license with them for examination if required. Okay, just turning to the two boxes on the right-hand side. This is really important. So all of the inland border facilities have available an inland border facility app. So this is an HMRC, this is an app that allows you to notify HMRC in advance that you are attending the IBF, and actually it's really useful to use the app because it allows you to record the local reference numbers that your driver is presenting without the need to handle that number through multiple different parts of the supply chain. So it means we are more likely to get an accurate number at the IBF for presentation and production of documents. So I would encourage everybody to use the IBF app because it allows you to pre-notify HMRC that your driver is arriving and that what they are there for, and it will make the IBFs more efficient. should you get to an IBF and there are problems, or you want to complain about the process at the IBF, there is actually a complaint box that you can use, which we'll provide you with later. Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. So these are a couple of examples of where, Heather and I work very closely with obviously our own staff using the working at the IBFs, but also with a group of agents in the UK and with our French colleagues to try and determine what are the common errors at the IBF. And these are just two examples of what can happen if we don't get this very basic and straightforward process right. First example, so an import from the EU to GB using transit. So the driver attended the inland border facility. He had transit documents, but could not show a customs declaration. The transit document, therefore, could not be discharged without the evidence that the goods had been entered with a customs declaration into the UK system. The agent couldn't be contacted because it was a Saturday, and we all know that some agents are 24/7, but some aren't. So the agent could not be contacted because it was a Saturday. The driver therefore had to wait until Monday morning to locate the correct references, and then the driver missed his delivery slot and will receive a penalty. So it's very basic, but it's really very important that the driver arrives with the right documentation and is able, if he needs to contact the agent for clarification. The second one is an export example, GB to EU using transit. So driver attended the inland border facility. This is a very common issue that we're finding. Presented one handwritten local reference number, LRN. HMRC, at first view of the document, of the reference number, could not identify it on the system because it was incorrect. The agent was contacted and provided one LRN correctly. The TAD, Transit Administrative Document, was then issued to the driver. The driver did not present any other LRNs for the remainder of his movements on his vehicle. At the office of destination in Europe, only one movement could be discharged. Remaining goods had to be returned to the office of departure. So a very straightforward example, but really very important to understand. The driver must present LRNs for all of the goods that he is carrying on transit. Otherwise, it prevents the discharge of documents at the office of destination, and probably, in most circumstances, a return of the goods to the office of departure for the documents to be issued correctly. So they're very basic examples of the system, but they're very common errors that we are seeing at the IBFs on a very regular basis. Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, there's one other point I'd like to make. It's a very important one. So turning to what Caroline said earlier about, so one common error we are seeing is into the French system is at the point of scanning into the SI Brexit system, we are seeing UK EADs incorrectly entered into the French system when they don't need to be. It should be the French formalities that are scanned into the SI Brexit system. So this is a common error because the EAD, UK EAD, is in a similar format. But this is just to reiterate that you do not carry, your driver does not need to carry a UK EAD. An export declaration needs to be made into the systems but a document does not have to be carried. So if the driver doesn't carry an EAD, it will prevent the error that is currently happening outbound from the UK with incorrect scanning. Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. So this is just a list of best practice for the inland border facilities. So you must use the Check an HGV service and obtain a Kent access permit. You should use the Attend an IBF app service to book onto the site in advance and provide the list of LRNs direct to HMRC, because it avoids the incorrect document being the errors that we've talked about in terms of LRNs. Complete your border preparations as early as possible in your journey. Do not try to complete them at the IBF. Provide your driver with a clear list of typed LRNs and use the IBF app. Include contact details for the agent in any paperwork. So what we are trying to do is where we get an error presenting a driver presenting an erroneous LRN, we try our very best to correct the error, and Border Force officers will try to do that through the agent where we can. But we can only try to do that where the agent is listed on the paperwork for us to contact. If there is no contact detail, we cannot contact the agent directly. Ensure your driver is advised of so this is an import procedure. If GVMS generates a need for an import transit to go to an IBF for examination, GVMS will generate a message into the nominated person on GVMS, and it is important that the driver gets that message to attend the IBF for an examination. That's a really important point. We're not seeing very many inbound transit procedures, but we need to see those that are held goods and proceed to an IBF for customs clearance. Your driver needs to bring an LRN or a non-activated TAD or a customs import document, including barcode issued by the French customs. And for issue resolution, there are NCTS, DEFRA and BPDG mailboxes, as well as the usual gov.uk sources. Don't use the IBFs if you don't need to. Don't allow the driver to leave until all relevant paperwork has been prepared, including any licenses. Don't enter Kent without a Kent access permit, and don't enter Kent without a valid COVID test. We are still seeing very large numbers of drivers arriving in Kent without a COVID test. And don't present a UK EAD. An EAD is no longer required. Okay, thank you. Next slide. So thank you very much. Some very basic and pretty fundamental information there, but it is at that level that we are seeing most of the errors at the IBFs. And the congestion that I've seen talked about in the chat bar, significant amounts of that congestion is because of the educational issues that we are seeing end to end in the system. So arriving at an IBF for the wrong reasons, with the wrong documentation or with incorrect documentation. And there are, of course, issues with unfamiliarity with staff, government staff at the IBFs as well. But we're addressing all of those when they're raised with us very, very quickly, rolling out some new levels of training once our issues are identified to make sure staff are properly prepared and are able to recognise the issues that we're seeing, common issues that we're seeing. And efficiency is improving very quickly, but we are still seeing some fundamental errors. So really important that the supply chain end to end is prepared for the requirements at the IBFs. Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you, Dave. Claire, I know you're in the chat and you've been very active for us, so thank you very much for that. We're way over time, so could you give us a quick update?
Heather. I will. I'll be super quick. Super quick.
Can my team get ready in the background with your team, obviously, to start, and our French colleagues to start answering some of the questions, Margaret? So can you please be prepared? Over to you, Claire.
Okay, thanks, Heather. So I will be super quick. And the slide is blank, and it is blank because we have some hot off the press news. And that is the announcement that the government have made yesterday around a trader scheme. So £22.75 million worth of funding. Each business that is a small to medium business in the UK and is either importing, exporting GB to EU or GB to NI moving goods will be able to access that funding of up to £2,000. And it is particularly for training and professional advice. And I think this very much talks to Richard Katz's point that, they are getting daily contact from the ill-prepared. So this is a very much a move to try and assist businesses upskill on customs, rules of origin and VAT in particular, because we know those are the issues that businesses are struggling with. So that was announced yesterday. There is information available on gov.uk. It isn't open yet to applications, but will be soon. So there you go, hot off the press from yesterday. In addition to that, talking about rules of origin, we have established an HMRC guidance task force, which is looking at particular pieces of guidance that businesses are struggling with. Rules of origin, we've actually published a very simple flow chart for businesses to follow. And we are next looking at transit. So we're continuing to try and improve what traders need to know. Again, talking to this fact that businesses are coming into this very underprepared for what they need to do. Alongside that, we have been issuing monthly trader letters. We've now ramped that up with weekly emails as well, so they can't say we're not talking to them. Bless them. And included in those weekly emails are top tips. As well as that, alongside that, there is free to access information. And I just want to give a bit of a plug for the HMRC webinars. We've had over 100 of those webinars with 47,000 businesses joining, and they do cover a range of different topics. So we're definitely trying to target that education. We've published top tips on transit. And I'm going to bring in Richard Thomas now to give a really quick update, Heather, if he can, on some of the transit issues.
Thanks, Claire. So I've been looking at the chat, obviously, and I think the two main issues with transit that people are concerned about, certainly on this call, seem to be the performance of the GB NCTS system and also sort of a whole range of user or of issues that are arising mainly because of a lack of understanding of the system, which is making it difficult to close movements. In our joint consultative committee, we've got a subgroup working to improve guidance. And as you say, Claire, we've got weekly emails. So I think what's really important is that we continue to get accurate information about the common issues that we need to communicate better on. And of course, it could be that we need more guidance, or it could be there are other ways to resolve those issues. So we're putting quite a bit of effort at the moment into getting analysis and understanding those issues so that we can address them in that way. We're clearly getting some feedback that there are performance issues with NCTS. We're monitoring the system, the core system itself, and the channels through which people access it in our IT centres, and I am always being assured that those systems are performing. They appear to be performing from our side correctly. So I think where people are suffering performance issues, what's really important, we had some helpful information from one software provider with frequency of different types of errors, which we're studying, and I think if we can get specific information, obviously we can look into that and see what the problem is. But we believe the system has got the necessary capacity at the moment It will be upgraded later in the year, but that's when transit volumes will increase further after the end of the UK staged customs controls. I could say more, Heather, but I know you're conscious of time. I think those are the key points I'd like to get across.
Yes, thank you, Richard. But I mean, you can probably pick some of them up in answers to some of the questions. So we need to move on to the DEFRA DGAL session soon. But Margaret, can you maybe pick some killer questions from the chat just to give to both French and UK colleagues, please?
Thank you. I think I'm going to pick up two, Heather, because Richard has addressed the NCTS thing, but we might pick up that further towards the end. But the first thing we wanted to just be clear about is that there is no EAD required if you're leaving GB, but there is, of course, if you're leaving France. Is that correct? Can I just get absolute confirmation of that from our friends in HMRC and the Douane, please?
Hi, Margaret. I'll go first from the HMRC side. So that is correct. If you're moving GB to EU, an EAD is not required.
Grand, thank you. From, I think Caroline covered it in her talk. Caroline, an EAD will be required when leaving the EU. Is that correct? And it will need to be scanned as drivers leave the EU. Is that correct?
Actually, it's not mandatory because there are some procedure in which you can link the transit and the export formality and procedure which is called EX plus T1, I think. And in that, when you use that procedure, actually the exit is discharged thanks to the TAD. So no, I can't say it's mandatory to have an EAD. But what I said is that if the exporter, the declarant, doesn't use this procedure, so that means he has an EAD and he has to scan it, because if he doesn't, he won't have the proof of the exit of the goods.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I think one of the suggestions was that HMRC and others could write this across the sky for the GB position. So if that's possibly in the budget, Claire, that would be lovely. Thank you. The other thing that we have was questions about the envelope system in France. Caroline, again, is there an API available for the logistic envelope system? An application interface whereby companies can link into the system.
Thank you for the acronyms.
Sorry.
Okay. Yes. Actually, the logistic envelope is on our website, and you can access to it on a computer or on a smartphone. But there is no smartphone application, if it is the question.
Yes, I think it's about companies linking their information directly from their records into your records so that they can create that.
Okay, in EDI, I think.
EDI is the other acronym that is used, yes, thank you.
Yeah, actually, no, we didn't develop that, but I think there are some IT companies which develop some IT tools to prepare and lodge customs declaration in EDI. They found some way to propose that that offer to the client. But for the moment, we didn't develop the envelope and EDI, and we don't know if it would be very useful, because sometimes we are asked to, and sometimes operators say it's not very useful. But I think I see that Olivier raised his hand. Maybe he has a compliment on that.
Yeah, for sure. What you say, yeah, Olivier speaking. What you say is fully right. So I didn't know specifically for logistic envelope, but some software companies for them, it's possible to so we can gather all the EIDs and they push everything, issuing a logistic envelope. So it works with some software, and it's also possible using border systems like Eurotunnel, Agile Border Pass, where you can, via EDI, push all your data in the border pass. It's linked to your loading, and then it's not a logistic envelope, but it is exactly the same impact. So we have different options today.
There are options. Thank you very much, Olivier. And I'm going to be very cheeky, Heather, and just do one more because I'm not sure that our friends in HMRC will be with us for the rest of the event. But just in case, Richard and Olivier talked about capacity issues and customs agents, and Claire, you've given us details about this funding. Is there anything else you can say about agent capacity and work that you're doing? And also, is this funding available only to UK established firms, or would it be available to EU firms?
Hi, Margaret. I'll answer the last question first. So it is only for UK established small to medium firms. That is the criteria. It's up on gov.uk. I think Luke has helpfully put, Shaheem has helpfully put a link into the chat. In terms of the agent capacity, I mean, you know, we're always open to what else we can do to support the sector. There has been £84 million worth of funding in that space already, but we were definitely hearing contact back from agents and from traders that what was needed was better prepared traders to help those agents. It was less work for them if the trader comes prepared with the right data and information.
Thank you, Claire. And I think that's something that we're seeing as a theme throughout this, isn't it? That we have more work to do. And I know Heather will have us lined up to do all sorts of events to cover detail and help traders in that way. So that's enough for me for the moment. And thank you. I think, Heather, if I can hand back to you.
Yes, thank you, Margaret. And just to tell everyone in the call, we are capturing every question in the chat and answering them live where we can. We're capturing the questions and the answers and the questions without answers, which we will circulate after the event to everybody. So don't worry about that. And we will also be sending the slides around to all. So could I have the next slide, please? And I'm hoping very much that my friend and colleague from DEFRA is with us in the call. Helena Busby will host this session. And just before you start, Helena, if you are there, I think you are. We'll give the time to you because, and then in the closing remarks of Jean-Michel and I, we can talk about future cooperation and to give you some of the time back. So over to you, if that's okay.
Thank you very much. For those of you that don't know me, and I think many of you do, I'm Helena Busby. I am the head of Member State Relationships and Readiness in DEFRA. And I'm delighted that I'm welcomed by, I'm joined by a couple of my experts who are ready to answer questions on SPS, John Briggs and Gary Donkin, and my colleague from DGAL, the French equivalent of DEFRA, Arnaud. So thank you so much to them for joining us. So please keep those questions coming, and we will do our best, as ever, to answer questions at the end of this session. But where we can't, as Heather said, we will take them away and we will answer them later and get back to you as soon as possible. And these slides will be available later. So I'm just going to kick off at first to just say, just to talk about some general issues that we have seen at the border control posts. In many member states, so this is not French specific, but a lot of these are down to trade readiness, and is quite often focused around procedural errors with export health certificates and pre-notification. Being from DEFRA, I will focus on SPS compliance issues. So there are still three major categories of non-compliance, we understand. Sometimes goods arriving with no export health certificate or the wrong export health certificate. Goods arriving without pre-notification, which is very important for SPS products, and goods arriving without a designation of a custom representative. I have to apologise for my dog. Rufus does like to talk whenever I'm trying to talk. I should say that I understand from French colleagues that we are reporting improvements in trade readiness. I do have to continue to emphasise the need to do more and to ensure that you are hiring a customs agent, that you are starting processes on time, and that you encourage you and your customers understand the processes from end to end. I'm working very closely with SPS colleagues in DEFRA to ensure that we are providing material that will facilitate businesses to be able to understand every step of the process, including customs and SPS requirements. So, DEFRA has a constant dialogue with our counterparts in France. We do discuss ongoing issues and new issues as they arise. And through these channels, we are closely monitoring live issues, and we are working very hard to resolve them. And your intelligence, be it from the French side or the UK side, is really important to us to help us unlock these issues. So thank you for your ongoing support and intelligence. I'm just going to go on to the next slide, please. Thank you. Thank you. I do want to touch briefly on April and July. For DEFRA products, there will be ongoing phasing of import checks. The 1st of April, health certificates will be required for products of animal origin, high-risk food and feed, not of animal origin. Importers will need to pre-register and submit pre-notification for imports. And we are going to provide support to you in the form of webinars from February to March for EU exporters and in general material. And please do, we will use this route obviously to share and provide information, but please do get the message out that these new requirements are coming online. There will be phasing of import controls, and those of you that have attended any of the other webinars will understand that there will be further phasing towards July, not after April. There will be a much more detailed programme of events to cover all of the changes in July and beyond. I am hoping that my colleague Luke Heindel or friend Luke Heindel from FGF is on the line. Luke?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
I can perfectly. Would you like to, if we go on to the next slide, would you like to give some reflections from your perspective?
Yeah, happy to, and thank you very much for having us. I think these events have been very useful across the board, and just thank you to DEFRA officials who have helped us with God knows how many issues and things that are stuck at the port. I think the effort is all very much appreciated on our side. So yeah, I'm Luke Heindel from the Food and Drink Federation. We represent UK food and drink manufacturers of all sizes, typically exporters, importers, making for the UK market and exporting some of those goods. So I'll just give a quick overview around some of the issues that we've been having. So I'll start off with what we think are probably some of the teething issues and what are and then go on to some of the more structural issues. I think on some of the kind of teething issues that probably will get better as things go on, has been kind of things around the presentation of documents. It's the way things have been scratched out, the translations of the various export health certificates. We have a lot of members that will be going via Calais to the member states that are in further into the EU, so you have to do about three different sort of languages on EHCs, and there's been some issues with the various interpretations of that. I think traces and getting companies onto that, or getting the importers to do the notification, because GB exporters can't do the traces notification anymore, has been particularly hard. So I know particularly it's been a challenge for organic exporters, and getting them on board with the necessary authorization has been a particular challenge. I think, matching up the CHED documents, the notification that goes into traces with the actual EHC has been quite a challenge, and it's really quite time consuming. Sorry, I'll speak a bit slower, rushing through this just to help you understand it. But so some of the matching up of the CHED to the EHC has been particular challenge. I think, the Traces is quite a manual system, and it operates on a line by line, so it's been quite a resource intensive operation by some of the exporters or the importers, I should say, matching up to the export health certificates. I think there's been a particular challenge around some of the approved establishment numbers. I think some of our members who are movers of composite goods have been asked to have their approved establishment number, whereas it's not needed for exports of composites goods. You can use other authorizations, or you shouldn't need that number. So I think those are kind of some of the general teething issues. I think, deliveries are just taking longer now. I think, the general thing seems to be you get an order, you're probably looking to deliver day 4, day 5 now, and that's probably there to stay. I think some of the structural issues that we've had, I would put them into 4 categories. I think there's the export health certificates just don't work in some cases. I think groupage has been a particular issue. The differing interpretation of BCPs around some of the certificates and the agent supports criteria. I think on the first one around the HC has been difficult. I think some of it's just been difficult to kind of work with the kind of fast moving consumer goods models that operate. So, it's being able to do the 24-hour pre-notification, get the documents in time for how quickly things move. I think it's being able to get the lorry registration and the correct documentations when in most cases, you probably don't know what lorry or what reg is going on before all the documentation's been signed. I think groupage has been probably the most publicly known challenge. I think there's big issues around getting the various documentation, the seals done on the lorries between all the different operators. I think, most publicly it's been the seafood sector that's been impacted, has been greatly impacted by that. I think you've seen some businesses of 30, 40 years operating that are very close to going out of business. But I think it's an issue across the board for food and drink. So I think to give you 2 examples, we've had one company who sent about 50 loads on groupage and they spread that out across different providers. And I think to date, they've only got about 2, 3, 4 loads over to the EU just because of how hard that's being. And that's, I think being felt across the board where very much the groupage trade has been a particular challenge. And I think this is forcing companies to use other routes that probably aren't sustainable in the long run. So instead of using groupage, you're getting exporters that are just moving their goods on single loads, which don't fill the actual lorries. So you're having half full lorries going over just so they can avoid using groupage, and that's meant that any consignments under about 30,000 quid or 30,000 euros is just unviable now. And that kind of thing, I think, has to be a long-term resolution. That can't be good to the environment to having half-full lorries. I think for both parties that are committed to COP26, there has to be a commitment to resolving that one. I think on the different interpretations of the BCPs is also quite a big one. I think companies are very much sending things with a hope and a prayer that it will get through, depending on where they're sending it to. So I think that they've been told to do things at certain ports that are at other ports that just aren't simply working. I think there's very much no universal interpretation around how the HCs should be presented. And within that, I think composites has been a particular challenge. I think the further up the processing chain you go, the more difficult it does on some of these EHCs. So you have vets that have been asking around, why are you using this certificate? And that's been a big debate around composites. So in certain cases, you've had people being challenged with anything that has meat in it around why using a composite for that. You should be using something else when, they're getting advice, or the UK vets or authorities are telling them that they need a composite for that product. And I think within that, those operating under the current exemptions of composites could have faced repeated issues around them being told that they actually need an AHC, when I think, they have on quite good authority that they don't. They meet the exemptions for composites goods where, they're not using more than 50% of dairy in their good or etc. They should be able to benefit from that. And that's been quite a challenge to have that argument at the port or to get it through the port itself. And that's all kind of making goods slower. It's making things cost they had the demurrage charges. I think, and then the last one is the agents or the commies at ports requirements. I think that was a bit of a surprise to most of the UK industry. I think we had engagements with both sides of the EU and the UK, and I think that didn't come too much in some of our conversations. I think that's been quite a challenge for a lot of businesses, and just adjusting to that one. I think it's added cost and people trying to get that one sorted. So I think those are kind of the teething and structural issues that a lot of our members have faced. I think one point I probably would want to make is around that we think exports are considerably down at the moment. I think, our colleagues and friends in the RHA probably put a figure around 68% of empties leaving the UK. I think from our members, they probably think around about 50% of their exports either aren't happening or not. And I think that we've probably got some work to do around identifying if that's a permanent change or if that's a temporary thing that people have been able to stockpile probably a lot more than people thought originally. So I think there's a question around that one. I think just to conclude, I think some of the things that would probably be really helpful is to get some kind of port level data around what are the most common errors, what are the most common errors on certificates, depending on which BCP you go to. And I think if we can start sharing some of that data with industry, you will eventually get the readiness building up. But I think, the more data we can share on that one would be helpful. I think the groupage one has to be solved. I think, it's currently a problem for UK exporters, but it's going to be a problem for EU exporters come April and July. So I think we have a real interest in making sure we can kind of maintain the groupage movements between the EU and the UK, because it's something that affects SMEs particularly, but also, it's just bad for the environment having half-empty lorries moving between territories. And then I think, the concern for us going forward now is around the April and July deadlines for imports from the EU to the UK. I think, we're seeing similar readiness levels that were for UK businesses back ahead of the transition. So I think, you'll be seeing all of the problems that UK businesses have been having with exporters apply to EU exporters. And I think we have a period now to make sure that we can avoid some of those issues. And particularly, these things are all circular. Problems for exporters affect importers down the line. It all makes things more challenging, more costly for haulage and kind of those businesses. So I think we have to address some of these issues. Otherwise, it's just going to be bad for businesses. I think it's a trader cooperation agreement. I think we need to go heavy on the cooperation agreement side of that. I think we need to get some of those committees up and running. We need to get some of the fixes that are in that agreement, particularly around, the lines on single customs offices across the short straits would be great. I think as UK PLC, we're not going anywhere. We can't exactly extricate ourselves from 20 miles from the channel. So I think we have an interest on both parties in sorting some of these things. I'll stop there.
Luke, I think we do need to move on. Thank you very much. I would like now to bring in Pierre Primo from DGLAL. Are you able to speak, Pierre?
Yes, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor and to invite us to this interesting meeting. So I'm Pierre Primo. I'm the Deputy Head of International Affairs in DGLAL, which is the General Directorate for Food in France, based in Paris. And today I'm with Arnaud Chatry, which is the head of the import unit. Thank you for inviting us. We appreciate a lot these exchanges we may have with the UK operators, counterparts, and so on. And thank you, Elena, for giving this overview. I can confirm your words of this constant dialogue that is very appreciated in order to well monitor the situation. I will also emphasize that we are in constant dialogue also with the Commission, because as you said, it's not only a UK-France issue, is also we have to see all the situation and at EU level. And so we have regular meetings with the Commission in order to harmonize all the decisions and all the practices at the borders, because this is the EU regulation that may apply for the import. So I will just make a brief overview of the situation. I will not be too long, I hope. And as you say, Elena, and I think you reached main point in your first slide that I would like to speak to this morning. We recorded a lot of non-compliance at the beginning of January. As you say, no SPS document, no pre-notification. So we decided to have a pragmatic and pedagogic approach in order to give the accurate information, in order to facilitate this issue, and in order to try to to have a situation that could be smoothly go to the good approach. And since we did this kind of approach for the 3 weeks of January, and since then we are in a full application of the EU regulation, and all the consignments that are not complying with the EU regulation are rejected. We fortunately may note an increase in the application of the regulation, but there's still a lot of non-compliance. And we, as Elena said, we have regular contact with DFRA in order to exchange and to monitor the situation through also our embassy in London. And so we are pleased that today we share the same level of information about the difficulties we may have. I will insist also on the commis, because it's one of the key points that we noticed since the beginning of the situation. It's important that commis are physically present to assist the control, including the presentations of the goods at the border post. I would like to insist a lot of that, because this is quite critical, as well as the capacity of reactive operators responsible for consignment available as I can say 24 hours a day in order to correct particularly the pre-notification. Pre-notification is also a key issue. Pre-notification is mandatory, so in order to facilitate the trade, it's particularly important to respect the pre-notification. One point also important is the need of taking appointment for animals, equidae and day-old chicks. So there's animal station in Calais, so it's important to take appointment in order to better facilitate the control of these animals. To end my points today, I just would like to stress one point that I think it could be a progress in the situation, in order to avoid too much administrative burden and in order to facilitate the trade between the borders. We use both for import and for export the same database, which is Traces. Traces is the EU system for certification, and Traces is adapted to use digitalization, e-certification, and we use Traces in such a way with other countries, such as the US, such as some countries in South America. So we will use Traces for the certification to UK. We use these Traces for the import from UK. So we believe and we share this position with other member states of the EU and with the Commission, that it could be a good way to improve the situation with the use of the electronic certification or the e-certification between the UK system and the EU system. That could be an important improvement of the situation. So I will not be too long. I just would like to emphasize that it's important to anticipate and to have direct exchanges with the border control post in France prior to the arrival of the consignments in order to prevent any blocking during the control of the consignment at BCPs, in order to facilitate the document control, the physical control, the identity control. So thank you again for inviting us. We may answer a question if you have some question. And so the keyword anticipation, pre-notification, and good exchanges of information. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pierre, much appreciated. I believe we have one final speaker, Sarah from Logistics UK, and then I will try to, Sarah, if we can be quite quick, and then we will try to do a couple of questions before I hand over to Heather to wrap up. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, no problem, I'll be short. Luke has already made a few excellent points that we share, so we'll be easy to be succinct. SPS definitely something that has been challenging. We've surveyed our members. Approximately 20% of our sample has had to postpone or cancel at least one consignment, one operation since the beginning of January because of issues with SPS compliance, whether it was their responsibility, their partner's responsibility. So considering, this is 20% of the overall sample, including companies that move consignments that are absolutely not subject to SPS requirements, it's quite a remarkable proportion. Now, the good news on that is that a lot of that was caused by misunderstandings or misinterpretations, meaning that it will be possible to overcome those difficulties with a bit more awareness raising, coordination, and dialogue around interpretation of the rules. Key point I would like to stress is that from April, export health certificates will be required for movements from the EU to GB, meaning that the onus of getting those certificates will be on EU companies. So we're more than happy to share our members' experience, the difficulties they've had, to try and make sure that our counterparts on the EU side can avoid those pitfalls. Another point in relation to that is the importance to have sufficient official vet capacity in the different countries where those certificates will be secured. So again, something that can be anticipated to try and make sure that the next stage is smooth. And last point, from the industry, really in terms of industry organization, the issues that we've seen on groupage and the difficulties to apply the seals on the consignments in a way that makes sense to at least at the same time speed up the processing at the border control post, but at the same time making it compatible with the way the consignments are collected from different points. That has required quite a lot of thinking and reorganization on our side. So something to anticipate as well, so that everything can be ready in time for April and for July on the EU side as well. So I'll just stop there. I think many points have been made already.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Your point about April and July is well made. I'm just going to try and go to a couple of questions, and I'll keep them quite broad. I think I would like to go to John, perhaps to talk a little bit about groupage. But Arnaud, there's a lot of conversation in the chat around day-old chicks. I don't know if there's anything that you would like to say about that. Are you able to come in?
Yes, I think can you hear me correctly?
We can hear you perfectly. Thank you, Arnaud.
Okay. I think there are a few questions. I didn't saw them all, but a question about the need to have an EHC per flock of origin. We're working on it with our BCPs because there are specific specific provisions in the EU regulation that doesn't make it mandatory. So we're working on it in order to make these provisions easier.
Thank you very much. And I believe, I know there is quite a lot of work that we have done jointly with you on trying to ensure that the flow of day-old chicks is as swift and easy as it possibly can. But we will continue that work, absolutely. I'm going to come to John. Firstly, was there anything you would like to add on day-old chicks? Because there's lots about this in the chat. And then would you like to just talk a little about groupage? Because we've heard about that a lot.
Yeah, thanks, Helena. So no, nothing to add on day-old chicks. Just on the groupage point, I think I've referenced in the chat the fact that there is already some guidance available, both on consolidation of consignments to support groupage and as I think someone else has helpfully linked on the groupage export facilitation scheme. I think we recognise that those solutions aren't ideal for all business models. We've recently published guidance on additional groupage models, specifically looking at Great Britain to Northern Ireland. We're speaking to the Commission and individual member states about similar solutions for GB/EU, and once those discussions have concluded, we would hope to make further guidance available, appreciating the difficulties that some of the exporters on the session today are facing at the moment. And if there are specific concerns, I did put the general email in the chat, and I think we'd welcome to hear more on those.
Thank you very much, John. Heather, I think we've got 5 minutes left, and I think it's okay. We'll hand back to you. I appreciate there's more questions coming in, particularly around pet food and other things, but given the complexity, those are things that we'll probably take away. So Heather, can I hand back to you?
Yes, thank you. As long as pet food remains at the top of your agenda, given that you and I are the two biggest dog owners that I know of anyway. So that's obviously an important issue for us. But yes, thank you, Helena, and thank you to colleagues in the chat. Just to recap before I give the floor to Jean-Michel to close the event, we will be pulling off all of this information from all of the questions and circulating them. There will be a recording of the event. We will obviously circulate the slides as well. But I also wanted to make an offer, and if you can indicate in the chat whether you felt this event was useful. French officials and UK officials would like to repeat this event in March at another technical session. So we would like to do that. And if you can indicate whether you think that would be a good idea or not, that would be helpful as well. But we'll be coming out with the information about that. So all remains for me to say, because this is about what you tell us and how we as UK officials and also our French colleagues and friends react to it. This is about you telling us what you'd like us to do more of, or do less of, or do things better. So without further ado, I hope Jean-Michel is still with us, and I would like to ask Jean-Michel to make some closing remarks and also to close the event.
Yes, thank you, Heather. I would like to thank you, Heather, and all our British colleagues for the material organization of this webinar, and the various speakers for the clarity and precision of their words and answers. The questions, the various and numerous questions asked in the chat show that many questions remain, and the usefulness of these types of webinar, some of the answers being provided by other participants. I hope that the presentation this morning have clearly shown that the smooth crossing of the border depends on the involvement of each actor in the supply chain, on the anticipation of customs and SPS formalities, and on clear instructions given to drivers and operators, customs clearance professionals particularly. We must be aware that collectively we still have a lot of work to do. We are, of course, ready from the French side to participate in another webinar in March, which will be, from our point of view, very useful. Thank you for your participation, and thank you, Heather.
No problem. Thank you, Jean-Michel. So we can now close the webinar. Thank you so much for dialing in.